So today's July 24th, 2021,
Happy Pioneer Day.
for those in Utah.
Wait, why just for those in Utah?
Well, I don't know. Just because that's where they celebrate it. So as this day was going on, I was like, oh, 8 years ago on this date, July 24th, 2013, was a very hard day for Trent and I. It started off as to be, a holiday, and we were going to go do these activities. Turned out to be Trent laying in bed until noon. And as a wife, like wondering what's going on.
Well, it wasn't normal.
No, that was not normal.
Some people can do that, but I usually am up by, I'll sleep until 7 or 8 sometimes.
Yeah.
So noon
So
is not.
that's way past sleeping in. And
I
his
didn't want to get out of bed.
and his family was there because we were going to go on an activity, and I'm going in and checking on him. I'm like, what's going on? And he won't talk to me. He's like cold stone, like won't say a word. And I can tell that he was in a really deep place because I'd never seen him like that before. So it freaked me out a little bit. And anyway, that day, we don't want to go into too much of the story, but basically that day turned into being a day for us where we hit like a breaking point in our marriage, where it was either going to go up or it was going to go out and down, basically. And we had to have a very frank, hard conversation that night, and we really exposed some hard truths that we've held on to for up until then. How many years we were married? 12?
13.
13?
Or almost, no, 12, yeah.
And those 12 years, we didn't talk like we did that day.
Well, I think a big part of it was, I think the culture that most of us grew up in as young men and men is that you're supposed to have it together and you take care of your own business. You don't need to go talk to anybody about it. You don't need to trouble your wife with anything that's worrying you or concerning you. You don't need to put that burden on anybody. You just man up and you take it. And so I felt like that wasn't healthy, but I didn't know any different, so that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wouldn't share things with Sarah that were bothering me. I wouldn't share my struggles with her because I thought she expected me to be perfect. And so my fear was, if Sarah really knew me, then she wouldn't love me. And so I was like, I know I'm imperfect. I feel like I'm an imposter. I know that I'm, struggling with these things in work and business. And I'm just feeling like everything is going wrong. And I don't know how to talk to Sarah. So I don't communicate these things. I don't feel like she wants to be with me. And so, we weren't connecting sexually because she had her views on it. And I felt like my views were different, and so it was like our expectations were totally off. And there's a lot of things that kind of like, it was a culmination of things, but the key thing was we weren't being authentic and vulnerable with each other. And now looking back, that I think the reasons were, I've kind of identified 3 main things. One is most men don't want to feel like they're not good enough. And so when they share their weakness with their spouse, they feel like, oh, maybe she'll think I'm not good enough. And so it's kind of this feeling, and maybe you don't word it that way, but that's the ultimate thing is, I don't want to be seen less than. I don't want to be,
because you're supposed to be our knight in shining armor.
Yeah.
According to all the romantic things that us women gravitate towards, that's our ideal, right? And so then in their head, then they're like, oh my gosh, I've got to live up to this expectation.
So that was the big thing, is
pressure.
Feeling like that I have to show up a certain way, be a certain way for my kids, my wife, and if there's any weakness or imperfection or beyond the things they can see, obviously, then I'm not good enough. And so that was the underlying thing, is I didn't want to feel judged, like I wasn't good enough. The other thing was, in order for a man to share with his wife, there was a couple concerns. If I share something that's really difficult that I'm struggling with, or maybe something in my past, or maybe something that I want to change in our relationship, my concern is that's going to go outside of our relationship. She's going to share it with her friends, her mom, her sisters,
So we like to talk.
lady talk stuff. And I'm like, well, I don't want to share with her if it's going to go to them. I might as well just keep it to myself. So that's a huge one. A lot of men don't express that, but that's really an underlying reason that they're not going to many of them don't even recognize that's why. But that causes men to feel like, oh, I can't share anything with her because then they'll go out into the world and I want to share something just between us. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is that men don't want to feel like what they share will be used against them later on. Like if I share something with Sarah because I want her to understand me, I don't want her to have that as something that she brings up all the time as one of my weaknesses.
Like, but you did this.
Yeah, or you have this problem. So those are the three main things: is fear of judgment, not feeling like we're good enough, fear that it's going to be shared with a bunch of other people and it's just meant to be between us, and then the third thing is that it's going to be used against you later on. So those are three big reasons why men don't talk to their wives. And if you ask your husband if those ring true to him, if you're a woman, you're married, you'll probably find that it might take him a while to get to it, but that's going to be his answer. Like, yeah, I'd be concerned about those three things. That's not everything. There may be something else for other men, but most men I've talked to, that's the reason why they don't talk to their wives. That's why they don't share the hard stuff. That's why they don't share their dark side, their struggles, their weaknesses. Because they feel like if my wife really knew who I was, then maybe she wouldn't love me, and maybe she would leave me, and I'd lose what's most important to me, our relationship and our family, raising our kids. And so a lot of men shut down, and they're not authentic, they're not vulnerable. What we found, though, is that the more authentic and vulnerable that we've been with each other, the more that we love each other. So my fear was, this is an illogical fear, but this is the fear that Trent had. If Sarah really knew me, she probably wouldn't love me, and she would leave me with the kids. And that would be like, that would ruin my life. Like that's my world, is my family. And so that fear of losing my family was so huge that it had to be like this breaking point where I felt like, now the stakes are so high, like, okay, I'm going to lose my family either way if I don't do something different. So I finally had to open up to Sarah about my struggles, my weaknesses, what I saw in a relationship, what I didn't like. So for all these years, we'd been sharing with each other, like, here, I don't like this, or hey, I like this, but we don't do this. And, we don't spend enough time together. We don't do this together, whatever it is. But by not verbalizing these things, the big things, we weren't talking about the little things either. So once we were able to start talking about those things that were hard, parenting became easier. Talking about other things became easier because Sarah and I created this situation where we now created this safe space to talk. And so I don't know if you want to go more into that as far as what creates that safety and that ability to communicate about things.
Well, I think from a woman's perspective, I guess I'm speaking for myself, at that period of time, though, that was a point where I was also like living this perfectionist identity, and really striving hard to live up to like what my culture around me wanted me to be, right? So I wasn't living in like who I was either, and I was like modeling all these behaviors that necessarily wasn't me. But I mean, I did grow up in a home where like we didn't really talk about hard things, like things that we really struggled with. And so for me to actually open up to Trent about those things, that was really hard. It didn't come easy for me. So yeah, those first 12 years, it was just like I would just brush stuff under the rug and act like nothing was wrong and try to live this perfect life, like that I had it all together. And we clearly know that's not the case. And so like having that like over and over, just like, no, it'll be fine. Everything will be okay. I don't want to share anything.
Not gonna bring it up.
I won't bring it up. I don't want to ruffle any feathers.
I don't want to argue.
I don't like confrontation. And so just be the nice girl, the good girl, right? And so living this good girl identity.
I tried to get Sarah to argue before, but she would always shut down. It's like,
yeah.
Not that I wanted to argue with her, but I wanted to have her share what she was thinking and feeling.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where I was like, if we can argue, at least you're sharing something.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily healthy, but it was that was me like trying to get her to react or respond.
Yeah.
So that's the pattern that we were in the first 12 years.
And so yeah, the turning point though was this day, July 24th, and we had to that night, like I just remember like
was
we
the
were
first of
sitting in the
many
car,
conversations.
right? Yeah, but I just remember sitting in the car. We were sitting in a park at the car, and I just remember my like anxiety, my heart was just like pounding out of my chest, and I finally just was like, I wanted, like, I basically was like, I'm out. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm to the point where I've been considering divorce. Like I'm
Yeah.
out. You know, and so for me to actually speak those words was very, very hard.
I don't think you said
Very
divorce. To me, at least. Maybe in your head you did.
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't think you ever offered that as a solution.
that was just, but that's what happens to, like, there was like this thing happening in my body that, like, because I never talked to him like that, you know, and so of course then, but I want to be the good girl, and so like I don't want him to like feel bad, and so there's just like we did this like dance throughout this conversation, but then ultimately we're like we need help, and so anyway, we ended up.
Well, kind of want to go to the topic that we talked as far as creating a safe space.
Oh yeah.
So that's more important than the rest of the story.
Yeah, I guess that's
it's
true.
more about how we got to this.
So yes,
the
as a
ability
person,
to start talking about,
like, just learning about actual what vulnerability is and what authentic conversation is like, and seeing it modeled was really helpful. And for me, like, learning about how I can feel okay in my own skin, even in my dark shadows and my dark side, I guess you could say, right? But also allowing Trent to do the same, and so coming together and like building trust that whatever is said between us is between us, and it's not like, sure, I've written a book and I've told things about Trent's story, right? But then there's other parts of his story that I haven't expressed. But there's power when you can actually share from a place of curiosity, right?
with more than sharing from curiosity, it's listening. So
Well, yeah, listening.
what we found that was most helpful is when we kind of understood this concept and learned about, you can either listen with judgment or listen with curiosity. So if I'm listening to something Sarah's sharing with me and I'm judging her based on her thoughts, her pattern, her behavior, her past, whatever she's sharing, if I'm judging her, then I'm not coming from a place of empathy, love, and compassion. I'm coming from a place of, I'm trying to fit her into a box somewhere.
That I want
Say,
you to
oh,
look
she
like
did this, so this is the kind of person that she is, or she's interested in this, so this is the kind of person that she is. And so when someone's sharing something that's hard for them to share, that they're struggling with, that they're dealing with, or there's something in their past that they've never shared with you before, coming from a place of curiosity as a listener is very powerful, because what it does is, when I hear something, instead of saying, oh my gosh, this means this, and defining it, I can say, I wonder what happened to lead to that, or I wonder where that belief or behavior
and
came from.
asking more questions.
And then asking questions to clarify and understand, and have a place of empathy and compassion in your heart for that person you're talking to. So it's easier to do when you and your spouse are both calm and you're not in a high emotional state. And I can see Sarah for who she is, as an amazing woman and a daughter of God, and someone who I love and respect and look up to, and who I'm raising children with, and all these amazing things about her. When I see that, and then she shares things with me, I can see her with a much more empathy, compassion, and love to try and understand and be curious and ask questions to understand her better and have empathy towards her more. Versus if I hear something, like, let's say an example, and this is like an extreme example, right? But a spouse divulges that they had an emotional affair or an actual physical affair with someone at their work. Well, that's a huge, like, obviously you're gonna have an emotional response. You know, I'm not saying this happens in one conversation, but let's say something like that happened. There's gonna be a very large emotional response from the person that's hearing. But if they're in a place of curiosity, instead of saying, oh my gosh, you're a pig and I hate you, I want a divorce, which might eventually be what happens depending on what led to it and how it happened and all of that. But they might want to be in a place of curiosity to understand, well, how could I get to this point where our relationship is so broken that was something that was acceptable or okay in your mind? And so being curious to try and understand what happened and why is this happening and where did this behavior or belief come from. And understanding that makes it to where there's actually a chance of seeing the other person for who they are, and it's a human that makes mistakes, it's imperfect, versus trying to judge them and place them in a box because they did something, you know, extreme in your eyes,
and you give up on them real
and
quick.
so now, and I'm not saying that there's any justification or excuse for, oh, he had an affair, that's, you know, excusable. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, as a person that's hearing something really hard, even if it's not that extreme, as you're hearing hard things from your spouse that maybe they've done or that they've, you know, had thoughts about or beliefs about or whatever is shifting or changing that you're not aware of, hearing that can seem like a shock at first. If it's like, well, I thought they were this other person, I'm hearing this. But if you're in a place of curiosity to try to understand and have compassion for them, then it's much easier to love them through that and ask questions versus just immediately jump to judgment. Because as soon as I jump to judgment, my ability to receive more information and have compassion flowing out is shut off. It may be not totally constricted, but it's reduced extremely to the point where you can't really have a conversation at that point. It's more of, now I've decided, I made judgment on your behavior, your past, your situation, your beliefs, your thoughts, whatever it is that it was shared, and I made a judgment on it, and now curiosity is gone, and now it's hard for me to have compassion and see you in a certain way because I now have defined you and put you into this certain box. And so that's something that's really changed our relationship, is having compassion and empathy through curiosity to try to understand what the other person's going through and then help them and love them through whatever they're going through to where they want to be.
Yeah. And we're still a work in progress. We actually just had situations.
I'm pretty much perfect, but Sarah's a work in progress.
The last two nights where I'm, yeah, anyways.
I am perfect, but Sarah, she's a total work in progress.
You know, and you guys
kidding,
know that I really studied extensively sexuality because that was one of my biggest hangups, and even still, like, I'm still have my moments, right?
Beliefs or
like last 2 days, and so yeah, we're still a work in progress in this, and like helping me to like understand, Sarah, okay, don't judge Trent because of this, but like how can I see it from his perspective and be more curious about why he wants to do this or do that or whatever it is. I'm not talking about like sexual, but everything else. But anyways, anyway, so I just was like, July 24th is it really is a special day for me. I don't know if it is for Trent, but it is for me because
I don't like to think about it much, but
because what it was is it got us to the bottom of the barrel, and the only way was to go up. And I really wanted to go up. I didn't want to go out. I really didn't want divorce. I didn't want that to be an option because honestly, like,
I really don't remember you saying the word divorce.
Well, in my head, but I didn't want it. And so I kind of was like, dude, I'm just going to, hopefully this scares him enough. You know what I mean? And so July 24th is kind of that day of like, it's really special to us. We're about to celebrate 20 years this year, which is awesome. And the last few years, especially, since
5 to 7 years. That year is hard. It was a hard year.
It was still hard because we had a lot of work to do.
We had a lot of deep conversations.
But even the last 3 years, since I really took a turn in my sexuality, I mean, our relationship has totally changed even more. And so anyway, we've just had a lot of friends reach out to us in this last year. I mean, it's been hard for a lot of people, but
we're used to being with each other all the time because I work from home mostly anyway.
Yeah.
So COVID didn't really shake things up for us much.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, there's a lot of changes.
There's a lot of changes and a lot of marriages that have basically dissolved, and friends going through hard things, and this is just a simple thing to understand. Like, go back to what Trent said at the beginning of this video, those 3 things. Like, especially as a woman, to be that safe place for your spouse, because
it's not just for the woman to do it for the spouse, it's for the husband also.
It's both, yeah.
Because there's some women that have things that they don't know how to share with their husband because they're afraid that he's going to get angry or he's going to do something.
The anger part.
So there's
yeah.
different emotional responses that men have than versus women. And so it's going to be different. And I haven't thought through the woman's perspective on this. So maybe Sarah can do another video going over more of that. But this today, I was just, when I was sharing with Sarah, some of the things that came up in my mind of that were huge once we understood them and changed them. And so that's what we wanted to share, is kind of like a few of the things that I recognized that when we changed those in our relationship, authentic, vulnerable conversations started happening. And now they happen more frequently and easier because we're not afraid of the outcome of it, because we know what the outcome is. We're going to become closer, more connected, and we're going to find a solution.
Yeah. So anyway, hopefully that was helpful in some way. Obviously, we're not marriage experts necessarily. However, we like to be relatable, and we want to be honest about where we've been and where we're going and where we're headed, and we just know that through vulnerability and authenticity, like, that's the way to go. And just, once again, curiosity versus judgment, which, pick what side you're going to be on. And I hope you made the
I would
curious.
pick judgment.
Okay.
It leads to more
It's
frustration.
just not, yeah.
I mean, you can eventually put someone into a box if you want, but the longer you can remain curious, the better your relationship will be, because then you can really see them for who they are and understand what motivated, what drove them, what caused whatever hard thing they're sharing to happen, or what belief that's changed, what's caused that. And the more you can understand, have empathy towards someone, the better you can connect with them. And so that's really what we hope that you'll take from this, is be curious enough to where your spouse feels safe sharing with you, and be willing to keep that a safe space where you're not sharing with other people. You're not going to use it against them later on, and that'll create that safe space for them.
That's it in a nutshell. Thanks for listening.